What if I told you the strongest empire in the world is already laying the groundwork for its own collapse? History shows us every empire eventually destroys its own money, and when money dies, so does the power behind it. Rome debased its silver coins. Weimar Germany printed marks until they were worthless. Zimbabwe issued trillion-dollar bills that couldn't buy bread. And today, the United States is following the same path. This is Money Unmasked, and in this film we'll expose 3 warning signs the dollar will collapse in our lifetime. The first sign is explosive money printing, and we just lived through the most aggressive episode in modern history. In early 2020, the COVID crisis hit. Lockdowns froze the economy, unemployment spiked, and markets crashed. The government's solution? Print, borrow, and spend like never before. Between February 2020 and the end of 2021, the broad money supply, economists call M2, increased about 40%. In less than 2 years, America created nearly half of all the dollars in existence at the time. Think about that. In decades of history, nothing even close had happened. The chart looks like a rocket launch. And it wasn't just bank deposits. The Federal Reserve itself was on a binge. Its balance sheet, the assets it buys with freshly created dollars, ballooned from around 4 trillion pre-COVID to almost 9 trillion by 2022. That's nearly double in just 2 years. The Fed was buying government bonds, mortgage securities, and propping up markets. This wasn't capitalism, it was life support by money printing. On top of that, Washington passed a flood of stimulus. The $2.2 trillion CARES Act in 2020, the $1.9 trillion American Rescue Plan in 2021, and several smaller packages in between. Altogether about 5 trillion in relief spending. Yes, some of it kept people afloat, but much of it fueled asset bubbles, corporate bailouts, and waste. Fraud alone cost taxpayers hundreds of billions. Some people ask, why didn't the 2008 bailouts cause runaway inflation? The answer lies in the velocity of money, how fast dollars actually circulate. In 2008, banks hoarded reserves and households deleveraged, so new money stayed trapped. But in 2020, stimulus checks went directly into consumer accounts, while supply chains were locked down. That meant too much money chasing too few goods, the textbook recipe for inflation. The result was predictable. By 2022, US inflation hit 9.1%, the highest in 40 years. And here is the real kicker. Even when inflation cools, the prices don't go back down. That gallon of milk, that rent payment, they're permanently higher. Money printing is a one-way street. Once you devalue the dollar, you never get the value back. Rome did it by diluting silver. Weimar did it by running printing presses. Zimbabwe did it by adding zeros until the notes were meaningless. The US does it digitally, trillions created with keystrokes. Different method, same result. And that's just sign 1. Inflation is often called the silent thief, and for good reason. Unlike taxes, it doesn't require a vote in Congress. It doesn't come as a bill in the mail. It simply erodes your purchasing power day by day. By the time you notice, your paycheck buys less, your savings shrink, and your plans for the future cost more. From 2020 to 2022, prices surged across the board. In 2022, official inflation was the highest it has ever been in 40 years. But here is the part politicians won't say. Even when inflation comes back down to 3% or 4%, it means prices are still rising, just slower. They don't reset lower. Once you've lost value in the dollar, it's gone. And then there's shrinkflation. Cereal boxes get smaller. Candy bars lose ounces. Toilet paper rolls quietly cut a few sheets. Companies know consumers notice price tags, so they shrink the product instead. And when steak gets too expensive, families switch to ground beef, then to chicken, then to processed fillers. This is substitution, the invisible lowering of your standard living. Politicians brag about wage growth. But look closer. Wages almost never keep up with inflation. Take housing. In the 1950s, the average home cost about 2 to 3 times the average family's annual income. Today, It's closer to 7 to 8 times. College tuition? Up more than 200% since the 1970s. Healthcare? A family insurance plan now rivals a second mortgage. The dollar didn't just lose value. Your chance at the American dream slipped away with it. So who benefits from inflation? The government and the wealthy. When the government borrows trillions, inflation erodes that debt over time. It pays back in devalued dollars. The wealthy park money in assets, stocks, real estate, art, that rise with inflation. But the working and middle class? They hold cash. They save in dollars. And they fall further behind. Inflation is not just an accident. It's a transfer of wealth from you to them. Here is the hardest truth. Inflation isn't a mistake. It's a feature of the system. It lets governments borrow endlessly without raising visible taxes. It lets central banks keep asset markets inflated. And it keeps the public running on a treadmill, always working harder, but never truly getting ahead. And that leads us to the next sign. Inflation isn't just a problem on its own. It feeds directly into the debt trap the US is now caught in. When debt explodes and interest costs consume the budget, collapse is no longer a question of if, but when. The third warning sign is the most obvious: unsustainable debt. The US national debt has already surpassed 34 trillion. That number is so large, it's meaningless to most people. So let's break it down. It means every taxpayer effectively owes hundreds of thousands of dollars. It means debt per citizen is larger than the median household's net worth. And it means the US government owes more than it can ever realistically repay. This debt didn't appear overnight. For decades, Washington has run chronic deficits, spending more than it collects in taxes. Balanced budgets are ancient history. Every year, the gap gets wider. In 2024, the deficit was about 1.8 trillion. That's nearly double than what it was just 5 years before. Here's where it gets truly dangerous. When rates were near zero, the government could borrow endlessly with almost no cost. But those days are gone. Now, with rates higher, interest payments alone are projected to hit $1 trillion a year. That makes interest one of the single largest items in the federal budget, bigger than Medicaid, bigger than veterans programs, and soon, bigger than the defense budget itself. Economists call this crowding out. As interest costs eat more of the budget, there is less left for everything else: schools, healthcare, infrastructure, defense. Imagine trying to pay your rent, but the interest on your credit card eats half your paycheck. That's America right now. Eventually, the government has three options: cut spending brutally, raise taxes sharply, or print more money. Historically, they always choose the printing press. And here is the tragedy. Future generations are the ones who pay. Young workers will inherit a system where their taxes go mostly to service old debt, not build new opportunity. This is exactly how late-stage empires collapse. The old consume the wealth of the young, until the young stop believing in the system altogether. The debt bomb doesn't just hurt America at home. It also undermines the world's faith in the dollar abroad.